In yesterday's video, we were introduced to the Clans Scryer, those Skaven who see the Great Horned Rat as the almighty inventor and use their affluence to create massive weapons of war. Well, today we're going to talk about Clans Verminus. And the other clans that we're going to talk about this week are all based on very specific things, right? Engineering, science, strange methods of warfare, maybe like flesh crafting and kinds of weird Frankenstein monster type things. But Verminus relies on the true core of the Skaven race to win the day: their numbers. When the enemy faces a Skaven army, they don't hear the weapons first. They don't hear the big war machines or nothing like that. They feel the ground tremble, and they come up with this deafening cacophony of squeaks and laughs and chittering scrapes. It's the endless hordes of Skaven, coming at the enemy in a living tidal wave of horror. It's just numbers. Endless, endless numbers. Bodies are what the Skaven Empire is built upon. It is their ultimate win button after all the machines and the toxins have failed them. Behind the Skaven armies, there are countless slaves toiling to dig mines, collect resources, build weapons, etc. And the clans of Verminus are the masters of rapid Skaven development, turning the endless teeming masses of starving mouths into weapons of war. And every clan, from every single great clan, needs bodies. The Claw Lords of the clans of Verminus are all too happy to sell their services, both their personal services of leadership and also the teeming masses beneath them, over to the highest bidder. And we're going to talk about those units that make up the clans Verminus today. And we're going to start, of course, at the bottom with the little clan rat, which is, of course, as you can imagine, the most numerous of them all. And as we've said many times this week, there are truly trillions of Skaven. Most of them are kind of the working class, if you will, but a handful of them are scooped up for military service as clan rats. And remember, a handful of trillions is still a mind-bending amount of them. Now, they aren't chosen for any particular combat prowess that they have, but they're chosen simply to be plentiful meat shields, to die in droves by design. They are, of course, the most numerous of the combat elements in any Skaven army. But remember, the vast majority of Skaven are laborers or even lower than clan rats on the ladder. So think about how disposable you treat clan rats in your game. There's trillions more Skaven who are even worse off than that. And collectively, clan rats form the main fighting body of most armies, but they're not all natural warriors. Their physical weakness, being tiny, and their cowardice prevent them from really any true kind of greatness. Their weapons are crude and cobbled together, and they kind of range on a spectrum from just being a pointy stick they found to being like a beaten sword that's been around for forever that they took off a dead comrade. That's been passed down from Skaven to Skaven to Skaven in the same way. Their strength doesn't lie in their weapons or in their armaments or shields or anything like that, but of course it's in their numbers, the collective waves of bodies that they can throw at the enemy. The initial shock attack, right, from an all-out push, it doesn't need skill to overwhelm the enemy, right? If you think of like a fortress wall and you have like maybe archers trying to fend off the Skaven horde, they don't need to actually be, crack shots to shoot off the archers on the wall. They don't need that. They just need to flood over the sides of it, and all the defenders will become so bogged down that it doesn't matter how good the Skaven are. This wave of bodies is insurmountable. You kill one and two more take its place. It's terrifying and kind of morally defeating to the enemy. It's all based upon the momentum of the horde rolling in and smashing the enemy. But once that momentum breaks, of course, things fall apart very, very quickly. You see, the numbers of clan rats are the kind of cause of this very weak, very flimsy courage that they have, right? They feel invincible when they feel like they have the numerical advantage. Yeah, we can take them, we can take on anything. But as those numbers begin to dwindle, the natural cowardice of the Skaven takes precedence. And entire flanks will collapse and flee in terror once some of those units begin to break. And another important thing to note about basic clan rats here is something called the Black Hunger. The metabolism, or the metabolic rate, I guess you would say, of the Skaven is extreme. And that massive, prolonged combat and physical exertion kind of leads them to this very rabid hunger. After a successful assault, the units are likely to fall into a deep, deep hunger, to the point where they kind of like eyes gloss over and they just kind of lose concentration. They can't think about anything else than getting something in their mouth. And what they'll do is immediately fall upon the dead they just left behind. So imagine this huge tidal wave of Skaven just smashing into the enemy line, and all of a sudden it needs to pause and almost like recharge, right? It loses that momentum naturally by the fact that they all have to stop and eat something because they just expended all of their energy. So if you're a Claw Lord, you have to make sure that first wave, that first initial push is just truly devastating. Also to note that when they eat, it is friend or foe. I mean, by that I mean all those Skaven who I'm sure they lost on the way in, those are also on the menu. They are not picky whatsoever. Now, right above the basic clan rat on sort of the pyramid or the hierarchy are the Storm Vermin. These are sort of the elite infantry of the Skaven race, and what's unique about them is they are chosen at birth. They stand about a head taller than typical Skaven, a little more bulky, a little more filled out, and covered in this dark fur. So I assume when the baby is born, they can pretty much instantly tell just by looking at it, oh, this is the kind of Skaven you're going to be, and kind of assign it that job. And so these are the elite melee infantry. They're somewhat rare and very highly prized. As such, they are outfitted with the finest gear and weapons that any Claw Lord or leader of a clan can offer. And when I say like the finest weapons and gear, it could be stuff that was made from Skaven engineers, like as prototype weapons or anything like that, or it could just be modified versions of stuff from armies they defeated. So you could see like human weapon, like halberds or whatever like that, and then it's modified to work for Skaven stuff. So it's still kind of a hodgepodge. You can still design whatever weapons you want, but they are supposed to have the best of the best. And within the kind of Skaven society, they have a multitude of services they offer because they function as sort of like a police, but also, of course, an elite military unit where they can be guards for, say, like the breeding pens where all the Skaven are born. They could be important for protecting assets as far as like if you are part of Clan Scryer, like we discussed yesterday, and you want to hide your research, you might have a guard of Storm Vermin out there to defend it. Or if you're trying to move things from one place to another, you want your caravan secure, Storm Vermin are a great way to defend things. In addition to that, they also make great bodyguards, and this is one of the main reasons that people want to have them around, is to have them function as sort of a retinue, if you will. Grey Seers and Claw Lords and Engineers all clamor for a chance to have a retinue of Storm Vermin, and part of it is just a very practical response to knowing that everyone wants to kill you, which they do. Everyone wants to put a knife in the back of their boss, so the boss has to get some protection. That's very practical, but in addition to that, they also want the prestige of saying, I have bodyguards, and I have an entourage. And it kind of feeds that ego that every Skaven has. Now, in addition to all of that, they also, of course, on the tabletop, as we would know them, act as a vanguard force to break the enemy's back. They are the true hammer to this army when it comes to melee because they are the elite fighting ones. They don't fall to the black hunger initially, they can keep the momentum of battle going. So if you want power and savagery, you'll pay for a squad of Storm Vermin. Now, one thing I want to note here is that they are not immune to the kind of political nature of Skaven. If they are sold off to the service of, say, a Grey Seer, and this Grey Seer gets to be a bit too much to handle, I don't want to serve him or work for him, it's been known that a few Skaven will end up on the end of a pike, just so these Storm Vermin can go back to their home clan and then find a new job somewhere else. So nobody's immune to this. You can pay for help, but even that is a gamble. Everything's a gamble in Skaven society. And the last unit we're going to talk about today are the Claw Lords, the leaders of this branch of Skaven, right? This is a position that no one can earn, but every Skaven wants to try and seize. These are the underhanded war bosses that lie, cheat, backstab, and betray their way to the top. Doing so they can assert their dominance over other Skaven. Getting to this position could be a simple assassination. You kill the person on top and assert your authority, or it could be a complex plan to sabotage a rival. With these kind of unfortunate accidents, in air quotes, like a tunnel collapsing, or maybe a piece of technology near them explodes, unexpectedly, as expected. The real crux of leadership here is you just need to be better at being a Skaven than the other Skaven around you, right? Just as the Great Horned Rat intended, you need to be smart enough to create the opportunities to seize control. Fast enough to do it when the time is right. Actually, like when your plan goes off, you need to seize it just at the right time. You need to be cunning enough to outsmart your peers. Be strong enough to fight them off, and bold enough to demand their respect. And that list of requirements that I just went through, it weeds out a whole lot of Skaven. But once you attain that leadership, it is far from over, because keeping order becomes the hardest part, because being on top just means that you are everyone's target. The real game of being a Claw Lord is mitigating the schemes of your underlings, right? You have to bribe the right ones, kill some others, and play this political game within your own clan. At the same time as doing that, you need to take it to the next level, right? Your position as their leader, it exists solely to make your clan greater. Make it bigger, assert dominance over other clans. It's like you're playing 3D chess, but everyone beneath you thinks they can do it better than you. And that's a whole lot of like political intrigue, right, going on there. But another important duty is simply just conquest. You keep your internal enemies busy with fighting, actually going out and doing war with other races, but also spoils, right? How do you divvy those things up, right? I said bribing the right people earlier. Maybe they get a better cut than some others because you know that'll satisfy them. In addition to that, to make his clan collectively better, the Claw Lord must be accruing trophies and accolades and honors and conquering lands to be able to show his superiority. That is, to satiate his employers, quail his rivals, and give him the income he needs to grow more and more. It's a difficult position to be in, and the ones who are Claw Lords are devastating in combat because they have the best of the best, they lead well, and they know how to play this game of 3D chess. And the last unit I want to talk about today, and it kind of fits neatly in here, is the Vermin Lord Warbringer. Now, we'll talk more about Vermin Lords in the Master Clan video, but simply put, these are really the greater demons of the Great Horned Rat. They are largely autonomous, they have their own plans, their own schemes, and they're really just everything that a Skaven is, just magnified. Just much bigger, have a lot more power. They are demons, they can be remade once they're dead. They can be summoned into the battlefield, not like necessarily in the game mechanics, but I mean like a Greyseer will offer up sacrifices and spells and try to call a Vermin Lord to him and bind him to his service. And each of the different kinds of Vermin Lords embodies a different aspect of the Great Horned Rat. They're all colossal beyond description. They offer their services to Claw Lords, Greyseers, and Plague Priests alike. And while all of those things, the Claw Lord, the Greyseer, and the Plague Priest, think that they're the one in charge, right? They're the one who gets the better end of the bargain. It is, of course, always the Vermin Lord, the better Skaven, the more Skaven-y Skaven who's playing a bigger game, right? That these smaller creatures fit into their own game, their own machinations. And the Vermin Lord Warbringer represents the sheer martial brutality of the Skaven race. He's the most like the Verminus clans. And actually, as a side note, they are the most commonly seen of all the Vermin Lords. Their sheer might on the battlefield is incredible. They're towering in both height and arrogance. They lead the charge against the enemy. And they're also prone, this is kind of a funny little add-on here, that they're prone to showmanship. They'll make grandiose entrances like coming in a big smoke cloud, or the reality around a enemy general will tear apart and kill the enemy general as they slice into reality. They enter so dramatically, and they kind of inspire and invigorate and muster up these huge hordes of Skaven for full-blown assaults. And while it seems kind of out there and dumb maybe to be so theatrical with your entrances, it is certainly well earned. Because when they do get into combat, they can back up the grand claims that their entrance makes, right? There are hurricanes of attacks and cackles of laughter, and blades are swirling all around. They can devastate an entire flank of an enemy army with brutal efficiency. And their presence, they are just like these living icons of the Great Horned Rat that inspire and invigorate all of the clan rats and basically every Skaven nearby. So friends, those are the Clans Verminus units. But let's talk about why they are so cool. Well, first and foremost, when we think about Skaven, right? When I first said that I was going to start playing Skaven because I wanted an army that was easy to transport around the country, I did another video, people scoffed and were like, oh, so your low model count army is Skaven? And the reason that happens is because they are iconically a large horde army. Now, I'm building Clan Scryer, which is very few models, but the thing is that knee-jerk reaction of being like, oh, no, this is a horde army. It comes from the idea of Clans Verminus, the idea that the true heart and soul of Skaven and Skavendom is the teeming masses, the unending hordes. Like, they are so much baked in the identity of this army, it's the first thing you think of. They embody those things, those kind of ideas and concepts that life is cheap and plentiful and disposable even. You know, you can just keep throwing your dudes at the enemy and they will eventually win out the day. They are the act of attrition made manifest on the table. I remember a story from the old world where it was actually in End Times Thankful, I believe, where basically Skaven were attacking a dwarf at the time, because they weren't dwarven then, fortification, and one of the dwarves kind of got separated and he accidentally stumbled upon the breeding pens of the Skaven race. And what they basically did was took a whole bunch of like bloated huge female rats, injected them with warp stuff, and so they were like producing children at an incredible rate, like an extreme rate. And the kind of gravity to that was the idea that there are so many Skaven here that this is now an extinction level event, right? There are far too many to ever have a chance of actually fighting and killing. There is no winning this fight. And when I think about that story, it reminds me of Clans Verminus, where it's like the true heart and soul of what the Skaven army is. It is the endless masses. And someone made a great point in another comment on my first video, as far as I had said that the only thing that can match them in terms of attrition is the Chaos Gods. And I said, well, what about Nagash? She can raise the bodies from the dead. And that is absolutely true. I will add to that Skaven will eat everything, including the bones of their fallen, and so maybe they'll kind of eat away some of the bodies. But my point is simply in saying no one produces living troops for their army the same way that these do. And when you turn the tide, right, you focus that into making military troops, it is incredible. And so the power of Clans Verminus, the fact that every Skaven army, no matter what they're armed with, is teeming with tons and tons of clan rats, shows the power that they must have, the affluence that they have. Now, that affluence comes at the cost of constantly needing to be on top, being the most skilled warlord, conquering the most, preventing backstabbing. So there's a lot of downsides to it, but these are an incredibly important part of Skaven culture and a real part of their identity. But again, that is just the beginning of a conversation. So friends, tell me your thoughts. What is your favorite Clans Verminus unit? For me, it's the Claw Lord, hands down. Like, no one else encapsulates what it is to play, like, the quote-unquote, the game of being a Skaven, right? Backstab other people, prevent yourself from being backstabbed, that kind of stuff. I just absolutely love it, but I'd love to know yours. I know Storm Vermin are a popular one, and Clan Rats just make up the vast bulk of so many armies. So tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in my next video.